I woke up face down on a park bench in a part of the city I didn't recognize. My mouth tasted like rust and old pennies, and my ribs ached like I'd fought with God and lost. The air smelled like car exhaust and yesterday's garbage. And for a second, I had no idea who I was. No wallet. No phone. No keys. Just a torn coat 2 sizes too big, a pocket full of crumpled newspaper, and a name, Michael, that felt like it belonged to someone I used to know. That was 9 months ago. Since then, I've made friends with pigeons, stolen stale bagels from the back of bakeries, and learned the precise rhythm of downtown traffic just by the sound of it. But if there's one thing I still have, it's stories. I don't know where they come from, maybe they're mine, maybe I overheard them in a past life, but they bubble up in my mind like old songs I used to hum. Sometimes when I talk, people stop and listen. They think I'm just another homeless guy making stuff up to get a buck. Maybe I am. But every once in a while, someone looks at me like they remember me. I live near a subway grate that keeps the sidewalk warm in winter. It's not much, but it beats freezing to death. My neighbor is a guy named Curtis, a Vietnam vet who hums Moon River in his sleep. He gave me half a blanket the first week we met. Said I looked spooked, like a man who just crawled out of hell. I guess I had. Curtis has a theory about people like us. He says we're ghosts, the forgotten souls of a world that moves too fast to care. But ghosts remember things. And that's my problem. I remember too little. Just flashes. A piano. A golden retriever. A woman's voice yelling my name. Sometimes I wake up with tears on my cheeks and no idea why. But I've got stories. Let me tell you one. There was this guy, maybe 45, sharp jawline, wearing a coat worth more than my life. He sat down next to me one afternoon outside the Union Station terminal. I could smell his cologne before I even saw his shoes. Expensive. Like cedar and power. Hey, he said, eyeing my sign, anything helps, thank you. I nodded but didn't speak. Talking first sometimes scares people off. You always sit here, he asked. Most days. You tell stories, right? That caught me off guard. Who told you that? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My assistant. She walks by here every day. Says you told her a story that made her cry in her car for 20 minutes. I searched his face, wondering if he was mocking me. But he looked dead serious. She's pregnant, he added. Scared out of her mind. Your story made her feel brave. I blinked. Which one? He shrugged. Something about a girl who ran away and lived in a movie theater. Oh. That one. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. Tell me something true, he said. So I told him about the girl who used to bring me sandwiches in Central Park. I don't know her name, but she had braces and this nervous energy, like she was always bracing for a punch that never came. One day she stopped showing up. I still think about her. By the time I finished, he was crying quietly. He pressed the money into my palm and walked off without a word. Never saw him again. People don't think homeless men notice much. But when you live in the cracks of the world, you see everything. You have to. You learn to read the hunger in people's eyes, not the kind for food, but for connection. For a story that reminds them they're still human. Still, there's this itch in my brain. Like something big is missing. I've scoured every shelter, asked every cop, every hospital nurse, every priest if they recognize me. Nothing. No missing person flyers. No social security record. Like I blinked out of existence before waking up on that bench. But one night, maybe a month ago, Curtis came back from a long walk and dropped a laminated newspaper clipping in my lap. It was old, from some business magazine. Saw this blowin' around near the library, he said. Tell me that ain't you. It was a photo. A grainy shot of a man in a tuxedo at a charity gala. The headline read, Michael, the reluctant heir turned philanthropist. My hands went cold. The man in the photo looked just like me, only cleaner, sharper. Confident. Alive. I showed it to 3 other people on the block. All of them said, yeah, that's you. But I had no memory of that man. None. Just the same damn fog that clouded every thought past last summer. So now. I'm sitting on a pile of stories that people pay to hear. And I've got this clipping folded in my coat, like some lifeline to a past that doesn't feel real. And here's the kicker, last night, a woman walked past me, paused, then slowly turned around. She stared for a full 30 seconds. And then she said, trembling, Michael. I stood up so fast I almost fell. But by the time I found my voice, she was gone. Gone like my memory. Gone like the man I used to be. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, knees pulled to my chest, staring down the block where that woman disappeared. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my ears. Michael, she said. My name. Like it meant something. Curtis found me the next morning sitting on the edge of the curb, wide-eyed and shaking. You look like you saw a ghost, he said. Maybe I did. I told him what happened, every detail I could remember, the color of her coat, dark green, the way her voice cracked when she said my name, the way her hand twitched like she wanted to reach for me but didn't. I described her face a dozen times over. Young, maybe late 20s. Sharp cheekbones. Hair pulled into a messy bun. She had this sadness behind her eyes, like someone carrying a secret too big for their chest. Curtis listened, quiet as always, then nodded once. That ain't nothing. She knew you, that's clear. I should have run after her. He shrugged. Maybe. But maybe she'll come back. I didn't wait around for maybe. For the first time in months, I moved. I started checking the same block every hour. Pacing. Watching. I asked shop owners, baristas, cab drivers, anyone who might have seen her. Most of them ignored me. A few looked guilty, like they wanted to help but couldn't admit they even looked me in the eye. I even went back to the newspaper office where Curtis found the clipping. I stood outside for 2 hours before a receptionist finally came out to smoke. I showed her the photo. You know this guy? I asked. She squinted at it, then at me. Her eyebrows jumped. Holy crap. That's you. I almost hugged her. She took a drag of her cigarette, eyes scanning me up and down. You're Michael. I think so. She blinked. You're a big deal. Or you were. There was a story, like, last year, something about a plane crash or a boating accident. Wait, no. You vanished. Everyone thought you were dead. Dead? She nodded. Your sister was on the news, pleading for help. She offered like, $100,000 for information. You really don't remember? I shook my head slowly, feeling the ground shift beneath me. She frowned. You look broken. I am. I walked away before she could say anything else. My brain was racing, heart pounding. I had a sister. She thought I was dead. The name came back to me later that night in pieces. Natalie. I whispered it over and over until it started to feel real. Natalie. My sister. I could almost hear her voice, young, bratty, full of energy. There was a memory of us building a blanket fort in some giant living room, the two of us giggling like idiots. I remember holding a flashlight under my chin and trying to scare her with ghost stories. I remember her pretending not to be afraid, even though her hands were shaking. And then, darkness again. It was like my brain was giving me just enough to hurt. I started carrying the newspaper clipping with me everywhere. held it like a totem. Every time I looked at it, I felt this strange mix of recognition and grief. I used to wear that tuxedo. I used to smile like that. I used to be someone. One night, I found myself standing outside a fancy hotel near downtown. I had no idea how I got there, just wandered until my feet stopped moving. The lobby was all marble and glass and chandeliers, the kind of place where people wear expensive watches and don't carry their own luggage. And then I saw her. The same woman from before. The one who said my name. She was sitting in the lounge, nursing a glass of red wine, dressed in a tailored navy blue pantsuit. Her legs were crossed, one foot bouncing nervously. I froze. Every instinct told me to run. But then she looked up, and our eyes locked. This time, she didn't run. She stood slowly, mouth falling open like she was seeing a ghost. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. People turned. A waiter gasped. But she didn't move. I stepped forward, my voice a whisper. Natalie. Tears flooded her eyes instantly. She crossed the distance between us in seconds and wrapped her arms around me so tight I thought my ribs would snap. She was sobbing into my chest, saying my name over and over like a prayer. I thought you were dead, she cried. Michael, God, you were gone. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't say anything. I just stood there, holding her like an anchor, like maybe she could pull me back into a life I no longer remembered. The hotel manager started yelling, security showed up, but Natalie waved them all off like royalty. He's my brother, she said fiercely. Don't touch him. We went up to her room, presidential suite, of course. I sat on the edge of a velvet couch, shivering while she brought me water and a blanket and a pair of socks she found in her suitcase. The whole time, she was staring at me like I might vanish again. I've been looking for you for a year, she said. We thought maybe you drowned. You left your boat out at the dock, just floating there. No note. No body. Nothing. I blinked. I had a boat. She nodded slowly. You used to take it out when you needed to clear your head. Mom's death hit you hard. You were drinking a lot. Pulling away from everyone. But I never thought you'd disappear. Something broke in me at that moment. A pressure in my chest that had been building for months. I cried. Hard. And for the first time since I woke up on that bench, I felt real. Natalie didn't let me out of her sight for the next 48 hours. She took me to a clinic first, a private one, quiet and full of soft colors and nurses who smiled without pity. They ran blood work, did brain scans, asked me questions I couldn't answer. When the doctor said, trauma-induced dissociative amnesia, Natalie let out a breath like she'd been holding it since the day I vanished. It's okay, she said, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. You don't have to remember everything right now. We'll take it one step at a time. I didn't know how to tell her how guilty I felt. Guilty for disappearing. Guilty for not remembering. Guilty for surviving when it seemed like I left a wake of grief behind me. She checked us into a new hotel, one even more private, and bought me clothes, real ones. Jeans that fit. A clean t-shirt. A warm coat. I took my first proper shower in nearly a year and stood there until the water ran cold, watching the dirt swirl down the drain like pieces of the man I used to be. That night, I sat with her on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights blink like stars. I don't remember anything after Mom, I admitted. Not the boat. Not the company. Nothing. She nodded. That makes sense. You shut down after she died. I mean, we both did, but you disappeared inside yourself long before you physically vanished. Was I a good person? She looked away for a second too long. You had a good heart, she said carefully. But no. Not always. That stung. But I needed to hear it. She continued, after Mom passed, you inherited everything. The house. The business. You tried to run it, but it wasn't your passion. You hated the board, hated the charity events. You just wanted out. You started drinking more. Got into fights with your fiancé. Fiancé? Natalie blinked. You don't remember Emily? I shook my head slowly, the name echoing in my chest like a bell. She left you 6 months before you disappeared, she whispered. Said she couldn't reach you anymore. A flash of a memory hit me like a slap. A woman in a yellow dress, standing at the edge of a dock, shouting something I couldn't quite hear. My heart lurched. I think I remember her, I said. Just a piece. Natalie looked at me, her eyes searching. Michael, the night you disappeared, you told me you were leaving it all behind. You said you didn't want the money, the company, the name. That it all felt like a cage. I don't remember saying that. You left your phone on the counter. I thought maybe you went upstate. Or to Europe. But then your boat showed up empty. I rubbed my face with both hands. I should have called you. I should have come back. You tried. Once. That made me pause. What? She got up and walked to her suitcase. From a hidden compartment, she pulled out a letter, weathered, torn at the edges, stained with something dark in the corner. This came in the mail 3 months after you vanished. No return address. Just, your handwriting. I opened it slowly. My hands shook. It was written in scrawled, frantic script. Natalie, I'm sorry. I don't know what's real anymore. The water is the only place that feels quiet. If I make it out, I'll come back. If I don't, please forgive me. I'm tired. I love you. Michael. I read it 3 times before my vision blurred. I wrote this. She nodded, her voice thick. You were spiraling. But you were still in there. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. There's something else, Michael. Something I didn't tell you before. I didn't want to overwhelm you. What is it? She stood and walked inside, returning with a folder. She placed it in my lap. I opened it slowly. Inside were newspaper clippings. Dozens. Some with headlines like CEO missing for months, presumed dead. Family fortune frozen amid legal dispute. Sister assumes control of corporation in brother's absence. I looked up at her, confused. You took over. I had to, she said. The board was going to dissolve the company. Investors were panicking. I stepped in to protect what was left. I kept flipping. Then I saw the one that made my blood run cold. Anonymous tip connects disappearance to internal financial misconduct. There was a photo of Natalie walking out of a courthouse, sunglasses on, lips tight. I looked up at her. What is this? Her face paled. Michael, I didn't. Did you think I was dead? She hesitated. Yes. Did you want me to be? No, she cried. God, no. But when you were gone that long, and they started investigating your records, and the IRS came knocking. I didn't know what else to do. I cleaned up what I could. I saved the company. I stared at her, feeling the walls close in. So what happens now? She stepped closer. Now, we fix it. We get you help. We rebuild your life. Together. But you have to trust me. I didn't know what to say. My sister had saved my life. But maybe she'd also used my disappearance to build something of her own. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the letter still clutched in my hands. I didn't know who I was before. And now. I wasn't sure who I could become. But one thing was certain. The man I used to be. He had secrets. And it was time I found out what they were. I spent the next 3 weeks walking through the ruins of my old life like a man haunting his own home. Natalie set me up in a private recovery facility just outside the city, quiet, surrounded by trees, the kind of place that smells like eucalyptus and boiled tea. There were therapists, memory specialists, and long, painful stretches of silence where I sat with myself and tried to pull the past into focus. Some memories returned in jagged flashes. The color of my old kitchen walls, olive green. The sound of my mother's laughter echoing down a marble hallway. The heat of an argument with a woman I now knew was Emily, my fiancée, her face streaked with tears as I threw a bottle at the wall behind her. That version of me was angry. Lost. A man unraveling. One morning, I opened the envelope Natalie had given me when I checked into the clinic. Inside were photographs, snapshots of a life I couldn't remember but was clearly mine. Me and Natalie on a yacht, champagne glasses in hand. Me and Emily, arms around each other at a gala, her head on my shoulder. Me, standing next to a podium with a big corporate logo behind me, smiling like I had all the answers. But there was something in my eyes in every single photo, some flicker of tension, of weariness. A man trying to look like he belonged in his own skin. The past few weeks, I'd been asking myself one question on repeat. What kind of man disappears without a trace? And now I had my answer, a man who's already been gone a long time before anyone notices. When I was ready, Natalie drove me back into the city. I asked her to take me to the waterfront, the docks where I used to keep my boat. She was hesitant, but she agreed. The place was quiet, save for the occasional cry of seagulls and the soft slap of waves against the pilings. I walked down the length of the dock until I found the slip where my boat used to be. It was empty now, the ropes swaying gently like phantom limbs. I stared out at the water and felt something loosen in my chest. Natalie, I said softly, I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Okay. When I disappeared, did you know where I was? Did you help me vanish? Her face twisted with emotion. No. But. I wasn't surprised when you did. Why? Because I saw how unhappy you were. You were suffocating in that life, Michael. After Mom died, it was like you were pretending, for me, for the board, for the world. But behind closed doors, you were falling apart. She sat on a bench, clasping her hands together. When you went missing, I blamed myself. I thought maybe if I'd pushed you to get help earlier, if I hadn't leaned on you so much, maybe you wouldn't have drowned. I sat beside her. I didn't drown, I said. Not in water, anyway. She gave a sad smile. I know. There was a long pause. Did you take the company for yourself? I asked. She looked at me, eyes glassy. At first? No. I took it because I thought you'd want me to protect it. To keep the legacy alive. But somewhere along the way, yeah. I made it mine. I got used to it. The control. The praise. She looked away, ashamed. I thought you were dead. And it was easier to grieve a dead brother than to imagine the one I knew might still be out there, hating me. I put a hand on her shoulder. I don't hate you. She turned, surprised. I'm still angry. Still confused. But I don't hate you. You did what you thought you had to do. So did I guess. What now? She asked, voice trembling. Now. That was the question. I thought about going back. Reclaiming my name. My company. My legacy. But the truth was, I didn't want any of it. The man I used to be, Michael, CEO, philanthropist, golden boy, was built on a foundation of pressure, grief, and impossible expectations. That man drowned a long time ago, even if the world didn't know it yet. I'm not that guy anymore, I said. And I don't want to be. Natalie nodded slowly, understanding blooming in her eyes. So what do you want? I looked out at the water, then back at her. A second chance. A simple life. Maybe I help people like me. People who fall through the cracks. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time since we reunited. I think you'd be amazing at that. We sat in silence for a while, letting the wind carry our regrets out over the bay. It's been 6 months now. I live in a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood where people say good morning and actually mean it. I volunteer at a shelter downtown, the same one that turned me away once when they were full. I tell stories to the people who listen, and sometimes I listen to theirs. You'd be amazed at how many lost souls walk among us with gold in their hearts and no one willing to dig deep enough to see it. I still see Natalie. She visits once a week. She offered to transfer half the company back to me. I declined. We're family. That's all I need from her. And sometimes, late at night, I take a walk down to that park bench, the one where I first woke up with no name and no clue who I was. I sit there for a while, watching the world move around me, and I wonder. Maybe losing everything was the only way I could find myself again. My name is Michael. And this time, I know who I am. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate it. Thank you.